speaking, and I'm here hosting VM's monthly webinar series. Today's webinar is titled the Hreflang Tag, How to Grow Internationally, Increase Foreign Conversions, and Avoid Duplicate Content. It will be presented by our very own Art Enke and Andre Willis. Art is our Director of SEO Services, and he manages the SEO think tank team and shapes advanced client strategies. As a technical SEO, he's often found conducting in-depth site analysis and enjoys hunting for duplicate content and boosting organic traffic for small and large brands. Andre is our SEO strategist with a diverse digital marketing background, including PPC, media buying, link building, content writing, and social media. Before we get started, and I hand over the presentation, I have a few housekeeping items to note. Today's webinar will be available for viewing by tomorrow. I will send out an email with the slides as well as the recording, so you can watch that and review afterwards. We'll also be happy to answer any of your questions. So if you take a look at your webinar interface, you will see a little section that says questions, and that's where you can ask them. Or you can also tweet us if you're into the live tweeting thing with the hashtag VMWebinar, and I'll also get to them at the end of the presentation. So I think that's all my notes complete. If you have any problems with the connection, just go ahead and sign off and sign back in, and that usually fixes the problem. So with all those notes complete, I will hand it off to our presenters, Art and Andre.
Hey everybody, this is Art Enke. It's a pleasure to be here today. We are going to talk about this Hreflang tag, and hopefully you've had some experience with attempting international SEO. Perhaps you're somebody or business that has international traffic and you're looking to convert, you're trying to avoid duplicate content issues. So we're going to cover a lot of that. In fact, what we're going to cover today is we're going to look at we're just going to do a quick introduction to Hreflang tags. And by the way, everybody refers to Hreflang tag differently. It's Real Ultimate Hreflang tag. We're going to just refer to it as Hreflang today. We're going to talk about how your business will benefit, common international SEO issues, how to analyze for opportunities, and some of the tools that will help you implement this and monitor success. So it probably not a big surprise to you that Internet users worldwide are growing exponentially. There is definitely a flood of international traffic heading our way, and part of our goal today is just to build some urgency around that fact. And in fact, just yesterday I was checking a couple of sources. There's over 3.1 billion Internet users in the world. This is year over year. Obviously, growth keeps going. And just to look at some of the specifics, China has the most Internet users in the world. Their share of the world population is 19%. It's interesting to point out that 46% of China is online. If you look at the United States and Japan, about 86% of us are online. But look at some of these emerging markets. If you take a look at India, I've highlighted it green on this slide. It's interesting, only 19% of the population is online, but they make up a huge percentage of the total world share of Internet users. So it goes without saying there's tremendous opportunity. Lots of traffic is heading our way in the next decade or two. Everybody, especially if you have, if the nature of your business is such that you can serve international clients, then you want to be here, and you're gonna want to pay attention to Hreflang tags. So looking at just in the U.S., real quick, just wanted to show you something I read just yesterday was about, with the introduction of the IPO of Alibaba, got a lot of attention in the news. Just last year, China e-commerce grew 31%, and now we're just over $2 trillion just in China. So things are going way up. If you look at the U.S. quarterly retail sales report, e-commerce sales are growing year over year over year. There's no dip in this trend. So it's very exciting, in fact, to be online selling products if you have services that cater to international users. It's a great time. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Andre. He's going to give us an introduction on the Hreflang tag.
All right, thanks, Art. The Hreflang tag was introduced by Google in December of 2011. When implemented correctly, this tag specifies what language is used on the domain or individual web page, therefore helping Google determine which version of a website to show to a user in their search results based on that user's location and language preference. You have three options for implementing hreflang: on-page markup in the header, in your HTTP header, or the sitemap, where you would include all language variations of a URL. You only need to choose one of these options, so choose whichever is most convenient to you and your web dev team. The hreflang tag has been around for more than 3 years, so it's not new, but it really does seem that Google is starting to make a push to increase support for hreflang in recent years. For example, last year in July of 2014, Google added a new report to Webmaster Tools called International Targeting. This tool helps you troubleshoot any common issues with the implementation of hreflang. The tool was also updated again in November, so it seems that Google is really starting to make a push to encourage webmasters to implement hreflang. So who needs an hreflang tag? Well, it certainly benefits companies who are expanding into a new foreign market and need to translate the content of their website into a new language. It also benefits websites in need of country-based variations of a language. So, for example, American English versus British English versus Australian English. So there are a number of international SEO issues that the hreflang tag can help resolve. One, search engine users of a particular country or language preference may not be shown the correct language version of your website if variations do currently exist, therefore making the results less relevant, which can lead to a host of other website issues such as higher bounce rate, lower time on site, etc. Another common international SEO issue is when the search results show two nearly identical URLs from the same website, which is confusing to users, but also a sign that the search engine is confused too. Confusing a search engine is a bad SEO strategy. Lastly, when a website does expand to a new language, search engines may not be aware of the new content right away. Hreflang tag is a way to give a heads up to the search engines so your new pages are crawled and indexed much quicker. So let's take a look at two hypothetical scenarios that benefit from hreflang. Here we have example.com, which is a primary English version of the website, and on the right we have en.gb.example.com, which is targeted to English speakers in the UK with British currency and British language variations. Example number two, we have example.com, and on the right, es.example.com, which is completely translated into a brand new language. So taking a look at a real-life example of correct hreflang implementation, we're on google.com. A search for Nike correctly brings up Nike.com, which is their primary English version of their website. Google.de, which is Google Germany, brings up Nike.com/de, which is targeted to German speakers. So kudos to Nike for correctly implementing hreflang. And let's kick it back to Art.
Cool, thanks, Andre. So I can't express enough the opportunities that this presents. And one thing I wanted to just bring up is ccTLDs. So one great thing about hreflang, if you implement it correctly, is that you can now fully develop your site. And it doesn't have to be a complete duplicate of your site, but you can have just individual pages developed on a separate domain. So this is actually something I come across all the time. We've got a lot of clients. We work with Fortune 500 companies and small businesses all across the country and internationally. And one thing that always comes up is, hey, I've got all these domains parked. I got the E version, I got the UK version, I got the AU, .ca, but I've always hesitated developing that because I'm afraid of duplicate content issues. So this is what hreflang solves. Okay, so you can use it on any domain, any subdomain, any subdirectory, but you should be consistent with it. So here's an opportunity. Here's a missed opportunity for a site that is ranking well in google.co.uk. So if you search their brand, actually they are ranking for some really good keywords, competitive keywords organically on google.co.uk. But if you take a peek at some of these elements I've got highlighted here, you'll see that there is no version, there is no UK version of this particular page. So this is a missed opportunity. So you've got US dollars showing up in search results. You've got the .com. It doesn't convert. And I'll show you actually a screenshot of some of the analytics from this particular site in a minute. Here's what it looks like on paper. So Hreflang, you can see these 4 example URLs. There's different versions here coded. So English Canada, English Australia. This is the opportunity that Hreflang presents. The opportunity is that you can now customize your content for not only full translated pages, but subtle regional variations. Here's what it looks like in the wild. Here's a, that's a Dr. Pete term from this field likes to say that. So in the wild, this is what it looks like. If you look at this site, they've got this, they're doing really, really well internationally, ranking all over the place, different countries. But look at the URLs on the right-hand side. There, you can go completely off domain. So if you have a version of a particular page, where maybe it's a product ordering page or whatever, you can go completely off domain, I should say. So you'll see on the right-hand side, these are blurred out to, I had to redact this example, but if you look at the different versions, there's the Canadian, there's Spanish, there's France, there's Germany. You can go completely off domain. So in other words, when somebody is searching in Google and they find your product page, you want Google to serve up the specific version of the URL to that intended audience. Andre mentioned the international tracking that happened in Webmaster Tools not too long ago. This is actually a fairly exciting development. Anytime, if you're familiar with organic SEO, anytime Google adds any kind of additional functionality, visibility in Webmaster Tools, it's kind of a big deal because they usually don't make that many updates in here. So this is a great one. This report in Google Webmaster Tools allows you to track the number of pages that have Hreflang tags present. It'll also highlight the pages with errors. So this is great that they have made this this push. One other thing I will say, well, actually, let's move on to the next slide. I wanted to get into some of the analytics. So how do you know if you need Hreflang tags? Let's say, for example, let's assume you have a product or service that is directly relevant to international customers. Look, if you're an e-commerce site and you consistently get traffic or sales from international users, do you already have a version of your, do you already have that region or that other country's version of your content? If you do, you have to implement this. But this is, let's assume that you don't for now. Let's assume that you have not even considered creating other versions of your content. Well, you can take a peek in your analytics and look, and if you search by geographic region, you'll see that there are opportunities. This particular screenshot shows that there are conversions happening from Canadian users as well as Australia. Now this site clearly is US only, they only have a .com. But take a peek at the fourth column over under bounce rate. The bounce rate for the United States version is 36%. It's fairly low. Look at how that jumps up. With Canadian users, it's at 70%, 90% for UK. Again, remembering that version, that screenshot we showed you earlier of the UK, the google.co.uk, and then the US dollars showing up in search results. So this site needs to, this particular site has an opportunity to create another version for each one of these areas. Now, well, that might seem daunting to you. It is for a lot of people, but the important thing to remember is that Hreflang can be implemented on a off-domain, and it doesn't have to be your entire site. You can in fact, you can develop your .ca domain. You can have 3 pages on it, targeting the individual, your highest visited pages from your US. Just create a Canadian version of that page, those pages, and then serve that up to those users, so that when that user from Canada or UK or France or Australia lands on the page, let's exclude France for this example, but just English-speaking countries, if you target that page to that user specifically with their currency, specific to travel information that's relevant to them, this bounce rate is going to decrease. and taking a look at so if you segment your analytics by language and not geographic region, it's important to point out that there's additional opportunities layered in here. For example, you got a couple of examples here of Spanish versions, but obviously there's so many Spanish-speaking countries, Latin America, but it's important to know that you want to pay attention to the highest amount of visitors from the specific region. So not necessarily the country, because within Latin America, for example, you'll have you could have at least a dozen countries that have that are visiting your site, but you want to have different versions, perhaps, for each one of them. For example, Spanish Mexico, completely different from Spain. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple of tools here, and we'll spend a little bit more time talking about what you can do for your business. So we've talked about analytics, we've talked about webmaster tools. How can you start to identify opportunities? One of my favorite tools is SEMRush, or SEMRush.com. You can use other rank checking software, but I really like SEMRush because right here on this screen you're looking at the filter for Google.com, so the US version of Google. You'll notice here on this screen where we can also select Google.co.uk, we can select the German version, the DE, the France version, Canada, and 21 other countries. So how you use this is you want to peek at your domain name or a competitor domain name and peek at the top ranking URLs and that correspond to specific keyword terms. So for example, Nike.com, very generic example. So number one, they're ranking number one for a number of terms. They've ranked for about 400,000 keywords in the US, on the US version of Google, I believe. But so like for example, on the right hand side, SEMRush will show you the specific URL which is ranking for this specific keyword term. So what you want to do is do the same exercise, but now select the UK version. So you're just selecting google.co.uk, but keep your domain the .com. So for in this example, you could put in Nike.com, but I want to see what how many URLs are ranking for Nike.com on the google.co.uk site. Now, real quick, Nike is a little bit unique. I shouldn't say unique, but they are very specific in their strategy. They've decided to put all the language variations, all the versions of their content right on their parent domain in subdirectories. So as Andre mentioned earlier, you'll see Nike.com/DE variations like that. That's great if you want to consolidate like that, but you're not limited to that. Like I mentioned, you can, if Nike chose to have Nike.de, they very well can, and so can you. And I think that represents to me an even greater opportunity. Now Nike obviously is a global brand, right? And they're well recognized, and so conversion isn't as much of a factor. But take Germany for example. Germans prefer .de domains, and I wish I had a stat to back that up, but I know a couple people in the industry that work for VeriSign, who owns the .com and .net registry, and I've shared some insights with them that conversions are much higher on .de in Germany. So if you sell products to Germany, you want to develop the .de version. But take a look here in SEMRush, coming back to this example. So on google.co.uk, Nike.com is ranking for these terms you see on the left: Nike, Nike UK, Nike ID, Nike Air Max. On the right-hand side, you can see the specific URL that's ranking for that term. So this is a really practical tool that you can use to check rankings on your site, and then to and see how, for lack of a better word, market share you have in that particular geographic region. So this is more of a technical. So one last thing here I wanted to bring up. So there have been a couple of developments recently with Hreflang and how Google indexes locale adaptive pages. This is more of a technical presentation. I would like to spend a little bit more time answering questions, and so if we could get into that portion of it, we'd like to do that.
Yeah, so we've got some time. I see a couple questions coming through, but please tweet us with VM webinar or on your question applet, and we'll get into it. So the first question comes from Jessica, and she asks, what URL is best for SEO purposes, subdirectory, subdomain, or TLCC?
So so TLCC, if you mean ccTLD, like country code top-level domain, I think that's what you mean there. So ultimately, it's about users and conversion, right? There's a lot of debate, and not tying that too specifically to this discussion, there is a lot of debate about subdomains versus subdirectory. Most people in the industry will say that subdirectories don't rank independently as well as, subdomains don't rank as well as subdirectories, and I agree with that 100%. But that's kind of a side issue, and that's not the direct solution that Hreflang solves for. What you want to consider is in your particular country, I would go for a subdirectory, but think about the broader application of this on the ccTLD. I really like the idea of being able to now create and develop individualized content, even if it's just a few pages on a separate domain. So if you own the .com, for example, you have a 10,000 page e-commerce site. You can develop a portion of that site in the Canadian version or the UK version, totally localized. And I like the conversion much better. In fact, we do see much higher conversion and better click-through rates for clients that develop when they're localized to the region.
So we have a couple of questions that have come up via Twitter and the webinar about duplicate content. So how can you prevent duplicate content penalties with similar pages across multiple country sites, and will you get dinged by Google?
Great question, and I'm glad that you brought it up. That is ultimately the problem that has always plagued us, right? If you've been in this industry for more than a few years, you'll know that duplicate content is the problem, right? We all want to avoid Panda-specific issues, and this is what solves for it. So correctly implemented Hreflang tag will serve up the correct version of your site. So for example, you have a .ca, all English, and you have a US.com, all English, and you have a .co.uk, all English. If you've implemented Hreflang correctly, there are no duplicate content penalties. Because Google will serve up the correct version to your audience. Now, it's important to note that this doesn't replace rel canonical. Rel canonical is separate within the domain, but this is just to ensure that the correct language variation, if there is one, is served up.
Okay. I know that we could probably go on that topic for a while. So duplicate content is a tough one. So a couple of questions regarding WordPress, since I know a lot of people are on that content management system. So would you recommend the WPML plugin, or what, if any, kind of tips could you give us about utilizing WordPress with the Hreflang tag?
So with WordPress, as with Hreflang is applicable across any platform. The WordPress, the multilingual plugin, I don't have specific experience with that plugin, but I have worked with similar solutions for it. Ultimately, if this plugin codes the page in one of the three ways that Andre discussed, either in the HTTP header, or XML sitemap, or directly in your page-specific code, then it will solve the problem. But I would have to look into that specific plugin. But ultimately, this is applicable across any CMS. The important thing to note is that Hreflang is a page-specific opportunity. So in other words, it's not a site-wide fix. This isn't translating anything for you. This is not creating that alternate version. You have to create the other language. You have to create the other version of your site, whether you're doing that dynamically or physically per page. But ultimately, Hreflang will solve it across any situation. The WordPress, I'll have to look into that specific plugin to see exactly what it does, but hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and I think a couple questions came up after your last point about canonical tags. So we have a couple questions on that. One from Dalton. He said, when, if ever, should a canonical tag be used in conjunction with an hreflang tag? And maybe this also foots to the second question, is how do you know when to use hreflang versus canonical? So maybe we can kind of clarify that point.
Sure. So canonicalization is a tool for showing search engines which version of a URL, each with the same content, is the dominant one to avoid duplicate content issues. Hreflang, on the other hand, is a tool to show which of the different, but often similar pages, based on the language or region, should show up in search. Right? What Google recommends is that you is not using rel canonical across country or language versions of your site, but use it within a country or language version. That makes sense. So it can be nested within a you can nest it within particular URLs. Ultimately, rel canonical is helping that country's version of the duplicate serve up the right page. I think of it, it's best to think of it in terms of, well, I like to refer to e-commerce a lot when I look at rel canonical, or rel canonicalization. So you have for example, a category page, and it has 150 pages in that particular category. If it's Nike shoes, for example, rel canonical will serve up, will make sure that users, let's say for the U.S. site, won't see page 500 or page 50 of that category, the Nike shoes category. They'll make sure that only page 1 of that category, or the specific canonical version of that page is showed correctly. That's completely separate from rel canonical. Rel canonical will serve up the correct version of that entire content section to the right user. So this isn't going to help anything in terms of helping like a UK person landing on that page. That's going to serve that user if they went into that path. Ultimately, if you go back upstream a little bit, rel canonical solves people right from the first search query, if that makes sense, not when you're on the page. So rel canonical should be thought of as a separate element. Great.
And then a question more as to best practices when it comes to kind of the architecture of all this. So can multiple hreflang tags point to a single URL? So for example, if you have example.com/CA that targets French and English speakers, could you have both that URL point to both a FRCA and an English CA? How does that work? Can you do multiple to one, or is that not best practice?
Best practice is it is unlimited.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a great video that I'd like to refer you to. Miley Oye from Google, she's a Google Text lead. There's a 17-minute video about hreflang, and I strongly suggest you take a peek at that after this webinar or whenever you're getting ready to jump into this. There's a couple other really good resources. But yeah, Miley describes the hreflang is unlimited, so you can have as many variations as you want. Off domain, within domain, the ISO, multiple language codes, international codes, whatever language or regional version of your page. And just so we're clear here, this is not doing anything in terms of creating this content for you. This is only if you have that version available.
Great. So if anyone has any other questions, please shoot them over. I see a couple that are paragraph long, so we're going to go ahead and email you individually so we can respond thoughtfully. But I think that's it, unless we have anyone pop other questions in. But I wanted to let you guys know we do these every month. Oh, I do see one. Let's do one more. If we have a US site and a UK site, can the hreflang tag suffice in the header, or does the tag need to be on each single product page?
Right.
That's a good one.
Well, yeah. So there are three ways to implement this. There's HTTP header, yes. So you can solve it there. You can use XML sitemap, or you can do per page. And I'm more attracted to the per page option if you're. It really depends on your individual situation. One common concern that I come across all the time is, well, okay, I've got all these parked domains, ccTLDs. I've got 20 versions of my site. And a lot of people look at that as a very daunting task to translate or regionalize every version of my site. Well, you don't have to do that. I like the per page option because I can look at in analytics today and look at my top 10 most visited pages, and I can, guess what, I can create 10-page website on my .co.uk or my Canadian version, and I can build a 10-page website, even though I have a 1,000-page website, and I can correctly code per page so that that user in that country sees it. Again, I would approach that from analytics, looking at the specific, the traffic and volume from a particular region or language, and then I would go after the per page. Now, if you're an organization that has a team ready to go, developed, and you're completely committed to offering all these versions of your site in full translations or whatever, then yeah, you might consider using HTTP header or XML sitemap. But from what we've seen, the most common cases, there was a screenshot earlier that I had, a very large site, e-commerce site, they have it all on a per page basis, per page coded. And they have all these versions of the off-domain, which is, for me, is interesting because the conversion rates are very high on that site, bounce rates are very low on that site.
Interesting.
So that's interesting to point out.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Art, Andre. We appreciate it. I know this is a lot of technical stuff, so I appreciate breaking it down for us to digest. Like I said before, we do these every month. Our next one's a little bit different. We have 8 Seinfeld secrets to content marketing success. So this should be some fun, interesting ways of looking at content marketing through a different lens. So Dave Haar, our Director of Business Development, will be presenting that 30-minute webinar on May 14th. So you can register for that on our homepage at verticalmeasures.com. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks, Art, Andre, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.